ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय।
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 So we'll continue our discussion on Canto 2, which is the Cosmic Manifestation, and Chapter 6, Purusha Sukta Confirmed. So we discussed till text 22 these two sections in our last class: description of the universal form as basis of creation, and Tripada Vibhuti and Ekapada Vibhuti. Okay. So this chapter is actually in continuation to the previous chapter, the 5th chapter, which is the cause of all causes, and the explanation of the explanation of Purusha Sukta started in last chapter itself, in the 5th chapter itself. We saw that which all verses were there, and we continued in the first 16 verses of this chapter where the universal form is described in detail. We also got to know actually how we should understand this universal form, and when all these details are mentioned regarding the universal form, what are we actually discussing about? We are discussing about Sarga here, and that the cosmic manifestation as we see now, or as Lord Brahma created, has not been created yet. Visarga has not yet happened. So the universal form is basically the subtle form of the Lord, which creates a prototype or framework for Lord Brahma to fill in when he does his creation, the Visarga part. Then the Tripada Vibhuti and Ekapada Vibhuti was discussed, that the Supreme Lord's, the universal form is an impersonal representation of the form of the Lord, and the Lord has several expansions, or he creates the spiritual atmosphere as well as the material atmosphere is an expansion of his energy, and his energy is divided into two broad categories. One is Ekapada Vibhuti, where one portion, 1/4 of the portion is manifested as the material world. It's Vibhuti because it's the potency of the Lord, which is manifested in this material realm. And then Tripada Vibhuti, where 3/4 of the Lord's Vibhuti is manifested as the spiritual realm. And one main distinction that we saw was that Ekapada Vibhuti, those who are not fixed in the vow of celibacy remain in Ekapada Vibhuti, and those who are fixed in their vows of celibacy, only they can transcend themselves to the Tripada Vibhuti. Okay, so this is a very important distinction. We discussed this specific point, but it's one of the most important distinguishing factors. Okay, that is why that particular text came up. Right? Others who are attached to family life and who do not strictly follow celibacy vows. So that's the reason why I underlined it, because it distinguishes between those living entities who can go to the spiritual realm, the Tripada Vibhuti, and those who remain in the Ekapada Vibhuti of the Lord. Okay. So today we will start from 23. So just see a quick overview. So 23 to 30 is Lord Brahma's appearance. So he is the first living entity who appears, and then his performance of sacrifice. Okay, we will see that. And then 31 to 33, Lord Brahma concludes with respect to cosmic manifestation and proclaims the Lord's supremacy. 33 to 38, in the 33rd verse, Lord Brahma will speak that, or rather, he will claim his own authority because he has taken firm shelter of the Supreme Lord. And the rest of the 5 verses from 34 to 38 will tell how the Supreme Lord cannot be known in full. He can never be understood in full, he cannot be known in full, but through devotional service, he can be known to some extent. So therefore, there is no other recourse but to take shelter of him, to surrender unto him, to be dependent on him. From 39 to 45, we will speak about the glories of Lord Mahavishnu. So that continues the aspect of creation. And then 46, Lord Brahma will express his desire to narrate the Lord's Leela Avtaras, incarnations of the Lord. Okay. We'll start the text 23. When I was born from the abdominal lotus flower, of the Lord Mahavishnu, the great person, I had no ingredients for sacrificial performances except the bodily limbs of the great personality of Godhead. Okay, so the sacrifice in the purport, Srila Prabhupada will mention here that Brahma created the sacrificial ingredients out of the bodily limbs of Garbhodakshaya Vishnu. Okay, so before Lord Brahma has to engage in his prescribed duty of creation, he has to please the Supreme Lord. So any activity that anybody does, he has to please the Supreme Lord and then he gets result for that. So Lord Brahma had to please the Lord, and for that he has to engage in sacrifice. But there were no other living entities apart from Lord Brahma and Garbhodakshaya Vishnu. Okay, only these two living entities were there. So for Lord Brahma to perform his sacrifices, what he did was he collected the sacrificial paraphernalia from the limbs of the Lord, okay, from the bodily parts of the Lord. Exactly how that happened and all those details, we do not know. Okay, but then this is what has happened. So that's how we understand. The abdominal lotus flower is part of the Lord's bodily limbs, and Brahma is born out of the lotus flower. Therefore, Lord Brahma is also part of the Lord's body. Okay. So it's mentioned here that the abdominal lotus flower is part of the Lord's bodily limbs. So this also we can understand, or maybe we can think of it that Lord Brahma, because the lotus flower is part of the Lord's bodily limbs, he took the sacrificial ingredients from this lotus flower itself. And this lotus flower is not the way we conceive it. It's mentioned in Shastra that lotus flower covers the entire universe, the length and breadth of it. Okay, so from it can be, I don't have an authentic reference for this, but because Srila Prabhupada mentions it here that the lotus flower is part of the Lord's bodily limbs, with context to this particular text, we can think of it that the Lord Brahma took the ingredients from the lotus flower itself, which at this point of time is the bodily part of the Lord. Okay, so nothing is created out of nothing, but everything is created from the person of the Lord. And Srila Prabhupada quotes 10.8 of Bhagavad Gita. And he writes that because ingredients for the sacrifice are taken from the Lord, and in fact, everything that is created within this material world is the energy of the Lord. And we have been discussing this concept from 5th chapter onwards, that the energy should be used for the satisfaction of the energetic. Okay, so the personalist worships the Lord out of a great sense of gratitude, utilizing the ingredients born out of the bodily limbs of the Lord. So why there is a gratitude? Because all his necessities are filled or fulfilled by the Lord. Therefore, out of gratitude, he does the sacrifice. It's similar to how Mother Earth is worshipped from the fruits and flowers, which basically originate from earth. And the famous example of Ganga is worshipped by taking her own waters and then worshipping her. For performing sacrificial ceremonies, one requires sacrificial ingredients such as flowers, leaves, and straw, along with the sacrificial altar and a suitable time, spring. Other requirements are utensils, grains, clarified butter, honey, gold, earth, water, the Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, and Sama Veda, and 4 priests to perform the sacrifice. What it basically means is that all these are the ingredients which were taken from the bodily limbs of the Lord. So Srila Prabhupada writes there are 4 expert priests who are required for performing Vedic sacrifices. Okay, Hota, Udgata, then Advaryu and Brahma. Okay. But expert Brahmana priests are very rare in this age of corruption and quarrels. Therefore, the sacrifice which is recommended is Hare Rama, Hari Ram sacrifice, Sankirtan. Other necessities include invoking the different names of the demigods by specific hymns and vows of recompense in accordance with the particular scripture for specific purposes and by specific processes. So even the names of the demigods, that also Lord Brahma was inspired by Lord Vishnu. I think it will come in the next text where It is said that by invocation of the demigods' names, the ultimate goal Vishnu was gradually attained. So all this paraphernalia which were taken from the Lord is actually meant for the satisfaction of the Lord, for pleasing the Lord. Therefore, all these different paraphernalia were manifested, or Lord Brahma took it from the limbs of the Lord and then offered it to him. Okay. So that way the Lord is very merciful, because even for us to attain qualification, in this case Lord Brahma, to attain his qualification, he has to please the Lord and he has to go through that process. Okay, he has to go through that process and then the Lord is pleased. But to go through that process, whatever is required for Lord Brahma, everything was supplied by the Lord himself. Okay, so this is the case even now, or for devotees, for those living entities who want to render devotional service to the Lord, everything is supplied by the Lord, and the devotee takes that and offers it to the Lord. Okay, so that's why everything is considered spiritual. If the devotee's attitude is to serve the Lord, whatever paraphernalia he collects, okay, that is also considered as on the same absolute level as the Lord. It takes that nature, even though it might seem that this is all material from a mundane perspective, but actually because it is used for satisfying the Lord, therefore it all attains a spiritual nature. Okay, and we have, Srila Prabhupada used to tell this, that his going to all around the world in aircraft, in flights, okay, utilizing all material facilities, it's all meant for the service of the Lord, and all these material ingredients or all these material objects are basically an expansion of the energy of the Lord. A pure devotee has the vision that he can see all the material objects as an expansion of the energy of the Lord, and since energy is to be engaged in the energetic service, therefore everything material can be utilized for the Lord's service, and that way everything material becomes spiritual. So when a devotee has a desire to satisfy the Lord, then the Lord supplies the ingredients. So from this, allegorically we can understand that even the material energy is supplied to those rebellious living entities. Even the material energy is supplied to the rebellious living entities so that they can engage themselves in sense gratification, and when they come back to their senses in association with a pure devotee, then they can take that same material energy and then offer it back to the Lord. So that way even the material nature, the material creation is also an expansion of the Lord's mercy. It just depends on the living entity's attitude, how he wants to engage it. Does he want to engage the Lord's energy in his own service, apparently, because anyway he is not able to serve himself, or whether he wants to engage the energy of the Lord into the Lord's service. Okay, so based on that. So Lord Brahma, he took all ingredients from the Lord because there was nobody else, and then he engaged that, or he used that in the Lord's service. So that is the process of sacrifice. Okay, so Srila Prabhupada writes, he gives some details here, that the whole process of offering sacrifice is under the category of fruitive action, and such activities are extremely scientific because they mainly depend on the process of vibrating sounds with a particular accent. And when it is done, then the corresponding result is automatically achieved. But in this age of Kali, okay, there are no qualified Brahmanas. So whatever sacrifice is undertaken in this age as a matter of show is simply a cheating process by the clever priestly order. But such a show of sacrifices cannot be effective at any stage. So no sacrifices, no demigod sacrifices are effective, or no Vedic sacrifices are effective in this age to satisfy the Lord. Okay, when we speak about sacrifices, we are basically speaking of how the Lord can be satisfied. Okay, so sacrifice was a method, okay, or actually it's a recommended method in the Vedic literatures to satisfy the Lord, to satisfy Krishna, to satisfy Lord Vishnu. It is there. But because of want of qualified Brahmanas, this method cannot satisfy the Lord. Okay, because qualified Brahmanas are required. There are, it says, extremely scientific. So Vedic mantras should be pronounced very nicely. Okay, the paraphernalia that is collected should be extremely pure. It should be clean. So many requirements are there. People do not have knowledge of this. Even to make this Yajna Kunda, there are no geometrical calculations which are provided in the Vedic literatures, and for different sacrifices there are different shapes of the kunda which has to be made, and only when you make them according to that, then only the sacrifice is considered to be proper. Okay, then the brahmanas, the 4 types of priests should be there. So many technical details are there which should be fulfilled, and then when sacrifice is conducted with all these conditions fulfilled, then it can help to, or it can satisfy the Lord. Okay, but it is not possible because of lack of proper brahmanas. Okay, and to get anything pure, to maintain purity within this material world, especially in Kali Yuga, is extremely difficult. Okay, to maintain purity is very difficult. So that is why performing, and the vibration of sounds with particular accent and all those technical details which are there, it's very difficult to do this in Kali Yuga. Therefore, the Lord is not satisfied even if the sacrifice is performed. Okay, and specifically demigods, for them also, there are rules in Vedic literatures even to perform sacrifices for the demigods. So even they are also not satisfied. So nobody is satisfied by performing these kind of sacrifices. So therefore, it does not matter. Even nowadays, we hear pious Hindus, they do this elaborate sacrifices for Durga, they do elaborate sacrifices for Ganesh, like this. But they are not effective because of lack of proper purity, cleanliness, proper intonation of the mantras, lack of qualified brahmanas. So therefore, none of them is effective at any stage. And ultimately, anyway, the goal of all these sacrifices is to take one to the spiritual platform, to become purified. But because none of them is done properly, therefore no purification happens, and it does not elevate a person to a higher consciousness. So therefore this whole sacrifice is not effective, it's useless. Yeah, and he says that because these sacrifices are primarily meant for fruitive action, nowadays what people do is they use materialistic science to achieve those requirements or their needs which previously people used to get from Vedic sacrifices. But still, gross material science also cannot help and fulfill the real purpose of human life. It can only increase the artificial needs of life without any solution to the problems of life. Therefore, materialistic life leads to a wrong type of human civilization. The ultimate aim of life is spiritual realization, the direct way of invoking the holy name of the Lord. So this is direct. This performance of sacrifices, when the demigods are considered as the limbs of the Lord, of the universal form, and when the demigods are satisfied, then it is assumed that the Lord is also satisfied in that way. But if the Lord can be directly satisfied by chanting His holy name, if Krishna can be directly satisfied by chanting His holy name, then that's the most direct process. And this direct process is applicable to everybody in Kali Yuga. That is why in Kali Yuga, the most easiest process and the most direct process is being mentioned, is being given by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Right? So people of the modern age can easily take advantage of this simple process, which is tenable for the condition of the complicated social structure. Yeah. So, several things can be mentioned here. One is social structure. Proper social structure is Varna and Ashrama, Varnashrama system, which is completely messed up in Kali Yuga. So therefore people cannot perform their prescribed duties, and if they cannot perform their prescribed duties, there is no question of performing sacrifices. Okay, because performing sacrifice is part of prescribed duties of different Varnas, and when people are of mixed Varnas, then they are not, first thing is they are not qualified, they do not know. At the same time, because of they are of mixed Varna, their prescribed duty itself is convoluted. Okay, their inclinations are disturbed. The mind is not fixed into the Kshatriya duty or for a Kshatriya or a Brahmana duty for a Brahmana, because the tendencies are mixed. It's all Varna Shankara. Majority of population Kali Yuga is Varna Shankara. Therefore, the prescribed duties are also not clear, or there is no clear conception. Or people who, when they engage in prescribed duty, it's supposed to give them fulfillment, but they do not think or they do not gain that experience of fulfillment when they do their prescribed duty. So that way, there is no inclination or there is no proper happiness or desire or satisfaction with which one wants to perform the prescribed duty. So everything is just a mess here. So therefore, the complicated social structure which is there in this Kali Yuga, it is not possible to engage in any type of sacrifice apart from chanting the holy names of the Lord. That is why Lord Chaitanya, being very merciful, he recommended that chanting is what is a direct process, because we are directly invoking the Lord's name, and that way purification will happen even if a person is not performing his prescribed duties. So chanting of the holy name is always proper, or rather always the best method, and especially it is so here because people cannot perform their prescribed duties. It's all mixed up in Kali Yuga. So for that reason, chanting is the best method. We'll go to the next text. Thus, so this is Lord Brahma continuing or speaking to Narada. Thus, I had to arrange all these necessary ingredients and paraphernalia of sacrifice from the personal bodily parts of the personality of Godhead. By invocation of the demigods' names, the ultimate goal Vishnu was gradually attained, and thus compensation and ultimate offering were complete. So, by invocation of the demigod's name, the ultimate goal Vishnu was gradually attained. Okay, so by doing these sacrifices, the ultimate goal, attaining Lord Vishnu, is only gradually attained. Okay, it's not a direct process. And thus compensation and ultimate offering were complete. So here this word compensation is there, and here also if you see there is recompense. This is basically an expression of gratitude. Okay, like compensating. Okay, so whatever the Lord has given, then we are trying to compensate that, or we are trying to express our gratitude by performing sacrifices for Him and satisfying Him. So special stress is given to the person of the Supreme Lord and not to His impersonal Brahmajyoti as being the source of all supplies, right? From the personal sacrifice from the personal bodily parts of the personality of Godhead. It says, Purusha Vayavair Ete. So Purusha, it's a personality of Godhead, not from Brahmajyoti. Thus I created the ingredients and a paraphernalia for offering sacrifice out of the parts of the body of the Supreme Lord, the enjoyer of the sacrifice, and I performed the sacrifice to satisfy the Lord. Okay, so this is the ultimate goal. The sacrifice is performed to satisfy the Lord, who is the enjoyer of all sacrifices, and the sacrificial ingredients are also taken from the Lord only. I think in the 3rd chapter of Bhagavad Gita also this verse comes, correct? That all the sacrificial paraphernalia is also Brahman. Brahmarpanam Brahmavir, Brahmagno Brahmanahutam, Brahmane Devagantavyam, Brahma Karma Samadhina. So if you have to perform Brahma Karma, then everything else, it also attains the same transcendental nature because it is for the satisfaction of the Lord. So attaining peace of mind. Srila Prabhupada quotes this Bhoktaram Ekatapasam text here and says that by satisfying the Lord, because it's mentioned, no, the enjoyer of the sacrifice is the Bhokta. So Bhoktaram Ekatapasam. Okay. So peace in the world is obtainable by performance of sacrifice and by practice of austerity. Yajna and Tapa, they should be there. And he quotes this verse, and it's interesting that Srila Prabhupada gives a different translation for this verse here. He says, the Karma Yogis know that the Supreme Lord is the factual enjoyer and maintainer of all sacrifices and of the austere life. They also know that the Lord is the ultimate proprietor of all the planets and is the factual friend of all living entities. Such knowledge gradually converts the Karma Yogis into pure devotees of the Lord through the association of unalloyed devotees, and thus they are able to be liberated from material bondage. So he is saying that the performance of such kind of sacrifices by the Karma Yogis means those who are following the Vedic literature, okay, and they know that if they have to fulfill their material desires, the Lord must be satisfied. So by performing these sacrifices like this, then gradually by the association of pure devotees, then they will be liberated from material bondage. So it's like the association of pure devotees, unalloyed devotees is just like the catalyst. Do you know what's a catalyst? Okay, if you have to transform a substance from one thing to another thing, then something is added to that, which affects that change. Just like when you have to make curd from milk, right? So what we do, either we put tamarind or we put a little bit of curd on that and then it transforms from milk to curd, correct? You know this, right? So this additional thing that you put to transform the milk to curd is called a catalyst. that which starts the reaction of the milk turning into curd. So for any of these yogis or any of this, it can be karma yogi, jnana yogi, hatha yoga, whoever, all different types of yogis, if they have to come or if they even have to liberate themselves from the material platform, then they must get in association with a pure devotee. Otherwise, it is not possible. So that's why pure devotees are considered as the walking and moving tirtha, because they make everything auspicious. When we say everything auspicious, whatever people are engaged in, whatever kind of activities people are engaged in, it attains its auspiciousness only when it comes in, when they come in association with a pure devotee, when devotional tinge is involved. Otherwise, it does not matter. Karma yogis will remain karma yogis, but they'll never come, they'll never be able to uplift themselves or liberate themselves. This is mentioned in, I don't know whether this purport or in forthcoming purports. Yeah, I think at the end of this, somewhere end of this chapter, that the same point that all the karma yogis, jnana yogis, different types of yogis, they can achieve their goal only when they have devotional services also included along with their processes. Otherwise, they will not get the result. Okay, so this association of unalloyed devotees is the catalyst which brings about the change, okay, in a person's consciousness. One might be engaged, one might be Vedavadarata, completely following all the Vedic literatures, but if he does not come in association with a pure devotee, he will never be able to understand the import of it. And this is the reason why Lord Brahma, when he speaks about his qualification of speaking about the subject matter, he will say that I have taken shelter of the Lord, therefore I can understand all these things. And the Lord is inconceivable, he cannot be understood by anyone, but if one takes the shelter of the Lord, then it is possible. And that taking shelter of the Lord will activate or happen only when one comes in contact with the pure devotee. Otherwise, that will not happen. So now he speaks about why sacrifice is meant only for the Supreme Lord, and it's basically a straightforward answer. Because the Lord is the proprietor of everything, the Lord is a friend of all living creatures, and he is the maintainer of the performer of the sacrifice, as well as the supplier of the ingredients of sacrifice. It is he only and no one else who should be satisfied by all sacrifices. Okay, he is the proprietor of everything. So everything that we do, he is the proprietor of that. He is a friend of all living creatures. So therefore, it obliges the living entity to do something back for him, because he is the Suhridam Sarvabhutanam. He is the dearest friend of all living entities. And he is the maintainer of the performer of sacrifice. And one who is doing the sacrifice, he maintains that person also. So the ingredient is coming from him, the process is coming from him, the mantras are coming from him. He is the best friend of all living entities. And then even the performer who is doing the sacrifice, he is also maintaining him. So ultimately, and as well as supplier of the ingredients of sacrifice, we discussed this. So it is he only, the Lord only, who should be satisfied by all the sacrifices, and no one else. And if that does not happen, then there is no peace in the world. So whatever mishappenings which we see in this material world is because the Lord is not pleased. And this is what Srila Prabhupada used to say, that people are engaged, famous United Nations. The United Nations, they're all, because of World War I and World War II, then United Nations was created so that there are no more wars. But still, all types of cold wars and hot wars keep happening. Right? In the first canto, Srila Prabhupada writes that it keeps happening, and the number of flags have increased under United Nations. But the nations are themselves not united. And this is because people have not taken up to the devotional service of the Lord. They are not engaged in sacrifices to satisfy the Lord. If they do that, then there will be peace. If they don't do that, then they'll keep fighting. So wars will keep happening. So there are multiple reasons that war keeps happening, because of slaughterhouses and other things. Ultimately, all this is because even this maintenance of slaughterhouses, people engaging in illicit activities, in all kinds of nonsensical materialistic activities. It is because they do not have an idea that they have to surrender onto Krishna. They have to render devotion service. That is the only way to attain peace. Okay, so Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur gives a reference to the Purusha Sukta, and it says Yat Purushena Havisha Devayagyam Atanvata. This is the Devatas performed sacrifice using the Lord as the oblations. And Yajnena Yajnam Ajanta Devaha, they performed sacrifice using the Lord. Basically means that they performed, they took the ingredients from the Lord to perform the sacrifice. My dear son, thereafter your 9 brothers, who are the masters of living creatures, performed the sacrifice with proper rituals to satisfy both the manifested and non-manifested personalities. So the manifested personalities are the demigods. So this is after Brahma has done the Visarga. Now the demigods are not yet created, okay, but the same pattern of sacrifice, the same process of sacrifice was carried out by them, the demigod, the other, the 9 brothers of Narada, because at this point even Narada is not created, technically speaking. Correct? Narada, yeah, Brahma is speaking to Narada, but when Brahma is speaking about conducting the sacrifice, he is speaking about the time when the Lord has, the Visarga has not yet happened. Flashback, yes. The Visarga has not yet happened. Okay. So at this point of time, none of them are created. But when Visarga happens, and Narada, his 9 brothers, everybody is created, then they also engaged in performance of sacrifices, such sacrifices, to satisfy both the manifested and non-manifested personalities. So it is Vyaktam and Avyaktam. Vyaktam is manifest, which Srila Prabhupada says are the demigods. And Avyakta is the Lord himself. The manifested personalities are mundane controllers of the material affairs, whereas the non-manifested personality of Godhead is transcendental, beyond the range of material atmosphere. When Lord Brahma conducted the sacrifice, he just used the names of the demigods. Correct? The names of the demigods are also, when Lord Brahma lists what all are the ingredients he required for sacrifice, he tells, this gold is required, this is required, that is required, and see different names of the demigods were invoked, and finally Lord Vishnu was gradually attained. Correct? So at that point, the names of the demigods were available, but the demigod themselves were not manifested, they have not been created. So these demigods, when they are created, the manifest personalities, the demigods, they engaged in sacrifices. Okay, to please the personality of Godhead. So Srila Prabhupada writes, in the age of Kali, the manifested demigods are also not to be seen, for space travel has completely stopped. In previous ages, Satyayuga, Dwapar and Treta, the demigods used to come to Bhuloka. They can make themselves visible. But in Kali Yuga, the demigods also are not to be seen. So they are also Avyakta for us. Okay. Because we are not qualified. So modern men want to see everything with their eyes, although they are not sufficiently qualified. Consequently, they disbelieve in the existence of the demigods or of the Supreme God. They should see through the pages of authentic scriptures and should not simply believe their unqualified eyes. Even in these days, God can also be seen by qualified eyes tinged with the ointment of love of God. Prema Anjara Churita Bhakti Vilochanena. So, and Santa Sadaiva Hridayeshu Vilokyanti. The saintly people, they can see the Lord, what to speak of the demigods. But the non-believers or the modern man, they just trust their eyes, which is, as Shaunaka Rishi said, are like what? The feathers of a peacock's eyes. No use, useless, because they do not see the Lord. They do not want to make themselves qualified also to see the Lord. Okay, so this verse is Purusham Jatam Agratha Tena Deva Ayajanta. Placing the Lord in front of them, the Devatas worshipped him by the sacrifice. And the demigods are performing sacrifice now. Thereafter, the Manus, the fathers of mankind, the great sages, the forefathers, the learned scholars, the Daityas, and mankind performed sacrifices meant to please the Supreme Lord. So now this parampara continues. First, Lord Brahma did the sacrifice. Then those who are directly created from him, they did the sacrifice. And finally, starting from Manu, the father of mankind, the whole of mankind performed sacrifices meant to please the Supreme Lord. So this is the nature, or this is the process, or this is the system of this material world. Everybody must engage themselves in pleasing the Supreme Lord or satisfying the Supreme Lord. That is what parampara means. So, it's mentioned that Daityas are also performed sacrifice to please the Supreme Lord. And Srila Prabhupada classifies that here. He says the Daityas are devotees of the demigods because they want to derive the greatest possible material facilities from them. Whereas the devotees of the Lord are Ekanishtha, or they are directly engaged in pleasing the Lord. Whereas the others, the demigods or others, are engaged in satisfying both the manifested and non-manifested personalities, right? It is there. So manifested personalities are the demigods. So others, many people are engaged in satisfying the demigods. That is also part of an authentic process. But just as we discussed before, these people who are performing sacrifices for the demigods are engaged in fruitive activities. Okay, and they should have an idea that it's actually meant for the Supreme Lord. The Supreme Lord is being worshipped through these demigods. That's what makes them a karma yogi. And only when they come in touch with an unalloyed devotee of the Lord, then they can come, or they can get outside, or they can get out of the material bondage and come to the spiritual realm. So Daityas, the famous Daitya is Hiranyakashipu, who performed sacrifices for Lord Brahma, to please Lord Brahma. So Daityas are devotees of the demigods. So Hiranyakashipu is a classic example. All the material manifestations of the universe are therefore situated in his powerful material energies, which he accepts self-sufficiently, although he is eternally without affinity for the material modes. Now this is directly speaking about the Lord. So this is Lord Brahma's concluding verses with respect to the creation. Okay, so if we go back to our breakup, conclusion with respect to cosmic manifestation, the Lord's supremacy. So with this, till the material world has been created, the Visarga has happened, and then the Lord has sent forth the process of sacrifices. You can refer to the 3rd chapter of Bhagavad Gita again. It is sent forth the process of sacrifices by which everybody can be happy and then finally attain the actual goal of going back home, back to Godhead. So this is, you can say, is an explanation of that section in Bhagavad Gita where the whole creation has been mentioned and the sacrifice has been set, into motion. Now Lord Brahma will conclude, with his realization of how the Lord is supreme, even though everything which has happened in creation has apparently come directly from the Lord. We will see these verses, very nice they are. All the material manifestations of the universes are therefore situated in his powerful material energies. So the material manifestation is situated in his material energies, which he accepts self-sufficiently. So even though he is self-sufficient, still he accepts that for fulfilling the purpose of creation. So living entities, they engage with material objects because they want to fulfill something. They are not self-sufficient. Correct? The tendency is always to accept something or supply ourselves something so that we become sufficient, so that we become satisfied, we become comfortable, we become happy. That's the idea. That's why people engage, or people have material desires. Why? And they engage more and more in material desires because they think by accumulating or by bringing their senses in contact with the sense objects, they'll become sufficient, they'll become satisfied. But the Lord is self-sufficient. He does not need anything else outside to make himself satisfied. He is Atmarama. He is the topmost Atmarama. He is self-satisfied. He is self-sufficient. So, even though he is self-sufficient, he does not accept the material energy just like a normal living entity. He accepts it only for the purpose of creation, to facilitate those rebellious living entities who want to enjoy separately from the Lord. That is the only purpose. So even the creation of this material world is actually an act of affection from the Lord. Because the Lord is affectionate towards the living entities, therefore the material world is created. So although he is eternally without affinity for the material modes. Affinity means he has no attraction. He has no inclination to interact with the modes. He has no affinity for the modes. Right? He has no inclination to interact at all. But still he accepts them, even though he is self-sufficient. The question put by Narada before Brahma concerning the sustenance of the material creation is thus answered, which is Yad Adhishthanam. So he is the one who is sustaining this material creation. And Srila Prabhupada writes that the Lord accepts the three qualities in the forms of Vishnu, Brahma and Shiva. Right? The Guna avatars. So when it is said that he accepts self-sufficiently through the material energies, although he is eternally without affinity for the material modes. So he accepts, he accepts the three modes in the form of Lord Vishnu, Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva. But now Prabhupada gives a very good example here to distinguish between the Gunavataras, and he says, a rich man constructs a big house by spending his energy in the shape of resources, and similarly he destroys a big house by his resources, but the maintenance is always under his personal care. So he engages Brahma and Shiva they are the resources, they are the resources who engage in this creation and this destruction activities. But the maintenance is actually done by the Lord himself. Everything in the material world is carried out by his wishes and direction. Therefore, the entire material manifestation is situated in Narayana, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So he does not have to do anything personally. Everything is carried out by his wishes and direction. Everything is done under his wish, by his wish and his direction. He has this Ichha Shakti. Even this creation started from the Ichha Shakti of the Lord. We'll see that, it will come in the third canto. This Ichha Shakti and, Ichha Shakti is basically the cause. And from then, so many other Shaktis are involved in creating this material world. But just by his Ichha, everything is done. Just by his wish, everything is accomplished. So even for maintenance of this material world, he does not have to do anything. Lord Brahma has to do something. He has to become qualified. He has to engage in sacrifices to create this universe. Similarly, Lord Shiva has to do something to destroy this material world. But Lord Vishnu does not engage in anything. And even his maintenance is part of his pastimes. And we will see, whenever the Lord incarnates in his Leela avatars, that is considered as maintenance by the Lord. But then it is Leela. He's engaging, he's self-sufficient. He's engaging his own transcendental pastimes. He is not directly engaging, or he is not directly concerned, I will not say concerned, but he is not directly connected to the material situation that is happening. But when he takes, or when he comes as a form of the Lord, or when he comes to perform his Leela, it is for his own transcendental pleasure and for the pleasure of his devotees. Srila Prabhupada also says, that this paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya cha dushkritam dharma samsthapanarthaya sambhavani yuge yuge. So for destroying the demons, or for destroying demons, accomplishing something material. We can take it that way. So for that, the Lord does not have to come personally. He can do that through his energies. So maintenance of this material world can also happen through his energies. So he is not directly getting involved in maintenance. But he takes up this portion of maintenance because he loves to interact with his devotees who are there within this material realm. Just for paritranaya sadhunam. Just to engage with his devotees, to give pleasure to his devotees and engage in his transcendental pastimes, the Lord comes to this material world and takes the form as if he is maintaining it. But the maintenance itself is not the primary function of Lord Vishnu. So that way, the Lord Vishnu is not directly connected to the Sattva Guna of this material realm. He engages in pastimes, and through his Leela, through his different incarnations, the maintenance automatically happens. And this is evident even from the pastimes of the Lord. Different great devotees of the Lord, when they rule the world or when they take the position of a Brahmana, then all auspiciousness automatically spreads, or everything is maintained properly within this material world. When Maharaj Yudhishthira was there, right, the whole world was very auspicious place. The maintenance was being done very nicely. Correct? When Maharaj Parikshit was there, same way continued. Then all the great kings which have been mentioned in the Puranas, even in Bhagavatam we will see, Maharaj Prithu, even though technically from Tattva's point of view is a living entity, but just invested by the power of the Lord, considered an incarnation of the Lord, he maintains everything. So the Lord Vishnu Tattva, the Lord himself, he does not have to directly engage in maintaining anything. By his potencies, by investing its potencies into the different living entities, the maintenance will automatically happen. So the Lord actually takes up this Sattva Guna, not to become associated with that, but just for performing his pastimes. Okay, that is how we should understand that. That is why the Lord is situated in Shuddha Sattva, even though he's taking the role of the Sattva Guna or the Guna Avatara of Sattva Guna. But the Lord is always transcendently situated. I hope it's not confusing. Right, it's clear. Okay. By his will, I create. Lord Shiva destroys. And he himself, in his eternal form, as the personality of Godhead, maintains everything. He is the powerful controller of these three energies. So Gunavataras are there, but he has his eternal form. And in his eternal form as the personality of Godhead, he maintains everything. Okay, in his eternal form. Not that he is conditioned by any of the modes. In his eternal form, he maintains everything. So when we speak of the eternal form of the Lord and he is maintaining something, then concomitantly it concludes or it comes to the conclusion that the Lord is only engaging in his pastimes when he is maintaining this world. Because he has his eternal form as the personality of Godhead and through that he maintains. Which means that he is transcendental. In his Leela, his maintenance of this material world is also one of his Leela. By the different Leela avatars, he does that. And he is the powerful controller of these three energies. Now, these three energies here can either mean the three modes, okay, the Guna avatars or the Gunas, Sattva-guna, Rajoguna and Tamoguna. Or as Prabhupada will speak here, it means the internal energy, external energy and marginal energy of the Lord. The one is Lord Vasudeva, and only by his different energies and expansions are different manifestations, both in the material and in the spiritual worlds, maintained. In the material world also, Lord Vasudeva is everything. Right? Vasudeva Sarvamiti Samahatma Sudurlabhaha. In the Vedic hymns also, Vasudeva is held to be supreme. Vasudevat Paro Brahman Nachanyothosti Tatpataha. In fact, there is no greater truth than Vasudeva. So, people sometimes consider that there are Trimurtis, Brahma, Vishnu and Shiva, but then Vishnu is beyond. He is the controller of Lord Brahma as well as Lord Shiva. Okay, he is beyond. Not that these three are maintaining the creation or Lord Brahma for creation, Lord Vishnu for maintenance and Lord Shiva for destruction. So, therefore, this pantheism, the concept of pantheism is applicable in this Hindu religion. It's what people say, but actually it is not so. Because the Lord, this verse specifically proves that because by his will, Brahma creates, Lord Shiva destroys, and he himself, in his eternal form as the personality of Godhead, maintains everything. So it clearly distinguishes between Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, and how Lord Vishnu is in a transcendental position, which is not applicable to Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva. And Srila Prabhupada continues with the conception of oneness as overly stressed by the impersonalist is also accepted by the personalist devotee of the Lord. The difference is that the impersonalist denies personality in the ultimate issue, whereas the devotee gives more importance to the personality of God. So the Lord has both impersonal as well as personal conception, Brahman, Paramatma and Bhagavan. Right? So he says the energies, the three energies which are mentioned here as Trishakti Drik, the controller of three energies. He is the controller of internal, marginal and external energy. The external energy is also displayed in the three modes of goodness, passion and ignorance. So he is controller of these three also. Similarly, the internal potency is also displayed in three spiritual modes, Samvit, Sandhini and Ladini, which in a very general sense corresponds to Sat, Chit and Ananda. Okay. So you can say these are the three modes. The spiritual modes of nature is Samvit, Sandhini and Ladini. Yeah, and another important point is that the Lord is never equal to the living entity. So in this purport, if we see in the first, within this is the same paragraph, but there are 4 points, 3 to 4 points which Srila Prabhupada stresses on. One is that Lord Vasudeva is everything. Then he says that the Lord has both impersonal as well as personal features. Then he says that he is the controller of the three energies. Okay, and that the living entities are never equal to the Lord. Okay, so these are the 4 core themes you can say. And this qualifies the Lord from the living entities and also from the material energy of the Lord. So it's a very clear distinction is being made. So if we analyze it even more, we know, right, there are 3 things involved within this material realm, this Chit, Achit and Ishvara. correct? So the Lord, Ishvara, is maintained, that Vasudeva is everything. Then we have the Chit, the living entity, and the living entity is not equal to the Lord. Okay, so that distinction is being brought forth. And Achit, the relationship between Achit, material nature, and the Lord being the controller of the material nature. So it's a very amazing purport because it clearly delineates or clearly explains all these three concepts. And as in Bhagavad Gita, Srila Prabhupada writes, right? One who knows the Chit, Achit and Ishvara, he is the perfect knower of everything. So that way this purport is very important in that sense because it clarifies the proper understanding of the position of Chit, Achit and Ishvara, primarily with Ishvara in the center. With respect to him, how the Lord, how the material nature and the living entities are related to him, because everybody is controlled by him and they can never become equal to him. The living entity can never become equal to him. And the Lord is also explained, saying he has both impersonal as well as personal conception. Okay. Okay, so Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he gives he explains here that Lord Brahma and Shiva are different from Vishnu because of their contact with Rajas and Tamas. Since they are under the control of Vishnu, though Vishnu is connected with Sattva Guna, he is Shuddha Sattva. He is not actually in contact with Sattva Guna since he is indifferent to it. Okay, when we are indifferent to something, we do not care what happens to it. That's how indifferent is defined. So the Lord is indifferent to Sattva Guna, means he is not concerned with the agitation of the modes. Okay, he is not concerned with that at all. He is indifferent to them, specifically Sattva Guna. So therefore he is not actually in contact, even though he is maintaining, he is the maintainer. So Lord Brahma concludes and he says, "My dear son, whatever you inquired from me, I have thus explained unto you. And you must know for certain that whatever there is, either as cause or as effect, both in the material and spiritual world, is dependent on the Supreme Personality of Godhead." So, cause and effect. So, Srila Prabhupada makes a point on that. He says, effects of the original cause becomes the causes of other effects. And thus, everything, either permanent or temporary, is working as cause and effect. And because the Lord is the primeval cause of all persons and all energies, he is called the cause of all causes. Okay, simple. We discussed that in the 5th chapter also, that the Lord is the original cause, and then from there, the effect, then it becomes the next cause. Similarly, you can understand when we take how the material elements are created, right? The modes are agitated, and then from ignorance, Dravya is created. Then we have sound. From sound comes sky, and from sky comes air, and from air comes touch. Like this, different things come. So they, even though they are effects of the mode of ignorance, but they become the cause of the subsequent elements. So finally, whatever you see is an effect of a cause. And one goes back, what's the cause of this? What's the cause of this? What's the cause of this? Like this, ultimately one should come to the cause of all causes. Ishvara Parama Krishna Sachidananda Vigraha Anadirade Govinda Sarva Karana Karanam. He is the cause of all causes. So Lord Brahma, he speaks about his own authority. Okay, not because he is proud, but because he has taken shelter of the Lord. O Narada, because I have caught hold of the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hari, with great zeal, with great enthusiasm, whatever I say has never proved to have been false. Nor is the progress of my mind ever deterred, nor are my senses ever degraded by temporary attachment to matter. Okay. And all this is possible because he has caught hold of the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Srila Prabhupada speaks here about the parampara, and he says that the followers of Vedic wisdom accept the statements of Brahmaji as gospel truth. And the reason is because he has taken hold of the lotus feet of the Lord. Lord Brahma is a perfect, liberated living being within the material world. And any sincere student of transcendental knowledge must accept the words and statements of Brahmaji as infallible, because that gives perfect knowledge. So this chapter, 5th and 6th chapter that we have seen till now, whatever Lord Brahma has spoken to Narada, he is basically saying that, oh Narada, you should not have any doubts of what I have spoken. Because whatever I have told has never proved to be false. Whatever that I have spoken has never been false. So whatever I have spoken till now, everything is absolute truth. It's perfect. And this is possible for me to do because I have taken shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord. The Lord, Sri Govinda, who pleasingly accepts the loving transcendental service of his devotees, gives all protection to the words and actions of his devotees. So to imply or to propagate the transcendental message, one must be a unalloyed devotee of the Lord. Okay, then only he can speak about the messages of the Lord. Otherwise, he cannot. And this is the reason why Srila Prabhupada used to contemn those people who used to, one of the reasons, there are several reasons, but one of the reasons why Srila Prabhupada used to contemn these professional reciters of Bhagavatam is this, because they themselves are not pure devotees of the Lord. So therefore, even if they speak the message of Bhagavatam, it will not have any effect, because they are not protected by the Lord. Because the Supreme Lord, Sri Govinda, he protects the words and actions of his devotees. Okay, because the Lord protects the words of his devotees, therefore when the devotees speak the transcendental message of the Lord, it has its effect. And the professional reciters, or those who recite only for gaining fame, money, popularity and things like that, they are not actually under the protection of the Lord. And because their words are not protected, therefore even though they are sounded the same way, but they will not have any impact. The devotees are especially protected by the Lord so that they may remain infallible. So till the point, or if a devotee, or rather devotees who are engaged in serving the Lord, they are protected by the Lord and they become infallible. They never fall down. So apparently, if we see, even if a devotee falls down, that's because he has voluntarily given up the protection of the Lord. It's not that the Lord has given up his protection, but the devotee has voluntarily asked for trouble, so to speak, that he does not want to remain under the shelter of the Lord. Okay. So the Lord is a person and the devotee is a person eternally. So the process of devotional service always begins with the service of the devotee who appears in disciplic succession. Okay, so Lord Brahma attained this knowledge through the Supreme Lord, by the Supreme Lord who imparted this knowledge onto the heart of Brahma. Then he is speaking this knowledge to Narad Muni, right? So the same message or the transcendental message which Lord Brahma attained from the Supreme Lord, we are actually seeing what Lord Brahma is instructing to Narad Muni. Okay, so this conversation is how the transcendental disciplic succession is being propagated. So this is what Lord Brahma spoke to Narada. Okay, this message. And then Narad Muni spoke the same to Vyasadeva, which is then recounted in the first canto of Bhagavatam. And then Vyasadev's realization is expressed in the 7th chapter. Okay, so even the concept or what all was the message of the disciplic succession is also maintained in Srimad Bhagavatam. Because the devotee has his sense organs even at the liberated stage, he is therefore a person always. So the Lord is a person eternally and the devotee of the Lord is also a person eternally. Otherwise, there is no question of surrendering. There is no question of devotional service. No, a person cannot become a devotee of a wood or devotee of a chair. It does not make any sense. Only when there is a person, then there is an expression of devotion. If there is no person, then there is no expression of devotion. It's simple, no. But still, no, this simple concept the impersonalist cannot understand. Even though they go through these literatures, still somehow does not make any sense to them. The devotee's senses, being engaged in the service of the Lord, never go astray under the attraction of false material enjoyment. The plans of the devotee never go in vain. And all this is due to the faithful attachment of the devotee for the service of the Lord. So this is how one can always remain under the protection of the Lord. The senses should never go astray. Astray means should go here and there. Okay, it should not go here and there. It should always be engaged in the service of the Lord. If the senses are engaged in the service of the Lord, then there is no attraction for material enjoyment. But if the senses are roaming here and there, then even one of the senses roaming can take away the intelligence of a man. What's that verse? Bhagavad Gita. No, not why. It's second chapter, right? I don't remember. Okay, anyways, it's okay. Yes, it's the verse. It's not second chapter, right? It's second chapter only. Yeah, so even one of the roaming senses can take a person away. And we have 11 senses, so should be very careful. Correct? We have 5 knowledge acquiring senses, then 5 working senses, and the mind. Right? One of the senses can take away. So should be very careful. Okay. Yeah, so Srila Prabhupada, in this purport, if you see the theme, Srila Prabhupada, what he writes here is, actually this is not the actual theme. I have written it here like this, that the Lord is a person and devotee is a person. But what Srila Prabhupada writes here is that the plans of the devotee or the words of the devotee never go in vain because they are under the protection of the Lord. Okay, it's the central theme, the same thing Srila Prabhupada repeats multiple times here. That those that therefore who is earnestly serious in heart and soul about being in intimate touch with the personality of Godhead in relationship of transcendental loving service will always be infallible in words and action. Same thing is, the plans of the devotee never go in vain. Okay. And then again it's mentioned here that, then he contrasts to the mental speculators, who on the strength of material science and knowledge, without any bona fide touch with the absolute truth, is sure to be mundane untruth and failure. Whatever the devotee speaks, it's infallible and perfect. But whatever the material scientists or those who are mental speculators speak, it is sure to be untruth and it should be failure. Because simply they are not touched with the absolute truth. It's an explanation of what Lord Brahma says here, that whatever I say I never proved to have been false, because he has caught hold of the lotus feet of the Lord. Nor is the progress of my mind ever deterred, so none of his senses were roaming here and there. Okay, so his senses were fixed in serving the Lord, and the senses never got degraded because of temporary attachment to matter. So basically, Srila Prabhupada explains these 3 points in his purport. Although I am known as the great Brahma, perfect in the disciplic succession of Vedic wisdom, right? Because he got knowledge directly from Krishna himself. And although I have undergone all austerities and I am an expert in mystic powers and self-realization, and although I am recognized as such by the great forefathers of the living entities who offer me respectful obeisances, still I cannot understand him, the Lord, the very source of my birth. So even though I have all these qualifications, people consider me so great, and I am in perfect disciplic succession also. We say, right, parampara. Parampara means perfect knowledge. But even if we are in perfect disciplic succession, undergoing lots of austerities, expert in mystic powers, fully self-realized, and are recognized as such by all the great living entities within this material realm, having attained so much qualification, still the Lord cannot be understood fully. Okay, so this, from this verse 35, 36, 37 and 38 will have this specific theme, that the Lord cannot be understood, does not matter, even though we might be in perfect disciplic succession. Brahmaji could understand the Lord to a little extent only when he was trying to serve him by the eagerness of his heart. To some extent, devotees can understand. Self-realization by attainment of the above holy qualification of Vedic wisdom, austerity, etc. can help one on the path of devotional service, but failing in devotional service, one remains still imperfect. Okay. Because even in that position of self-realization, one cannot factually know the Supreme Lord. Even if one is perfectly realized himself that he is not the self-realization is what? We are not this body, we are living entities. We are Brahman, Aham Brahmasmi. That's the definition of self-realization when it's not connected to the Lord. Okay, so that's the proper definition of self-realization, because the person has realized that he is not this body, but Brahman, he is spirit. But even that person cannot understand the Lord because bhaktya maam abhijanati, one must be engaged in devotion service. And Brahma Bhuta Prasannatma Nashoshiti na Kankshati Sama Sarvesha Bhuteshu. One who has attained this position, then he attains the devotional service of the Lord. And when he attains the devotional service of the Lord, then he can understand something about the Lord. Okay. These are consecutive verses. Mad Bhaktim Labate Param. Then he attains devotional service. And only after he attains devotional service, Bhaktya Mam Abhijanati, then he can know something about the Lord. Otherwise, no. So one who is Brahma Bhuta, he by definition, he cannot understand the Lord. By definition, he cannot understand Krishna. Only at that point, again, the catalyst, by association of unalloyed devotees of the Lord, then he attains bhakti. And when he attains bhakti, by that devotional service, he can understand the Lord. So that is why impersonalist, even Brahmavadis, they cannot understand the Lord unless and until they come in touch with the Lord or with the devotees of the Lord. They cannot understand. They might be Brahma Bhuta. They are not Jiva Bhuta. They are in transcendental position. But understanding the Lord is not possible. So when we speak about matter and spirit, even within spiritual nature, we have to make that distinction. That those who are Brahma Bhutas, who have attained transcendence, they cannot understand the Lord if they are not devotees of the Lord. So concomitantly, it is understood that only one who is a devotee of the Lord can go enter into the Vaikuntha planets. Just disassociation of oneself from matter or realization of oneself as spirit is in itself no qualification to go to the Vaikuntha planets. Okay, they will be thrown down. They cannot enter into the Vaikuntha planets. There are, this Dwarapalakas are there. They will not allow you inside. Those who are only in self-realized, but not devotees of the Lord. That's why impersonalist, the Brahmavadis or those impersonalists who are not very offensive to the Lord, they might go to the level of Brahmajyoti. But again they have to fall down. Patanti. They again have to come down. Because they cannot enter into the spiritual realm. Even in material existence, one is merged in the existence of the Lord. Right? Because the Lord is the material realm by the expansion of his energy. So one is merged into the material energy of the Lord. Totally absorbed into the Lord through his material energy. Okay. No materialist can disentangle the self from matter, for the self is merged in the external energy of the Lord. Okay, so it's already merged. He cannot disentangle himself just without the mercy of the Lord. So even the impersonalist also, they have to do some type of devotional service. Even though they might not have full faith in it, they have to do some puja, some worship, some deity worship, something they do. Even the impersonalist, if they do, they open temples, they have this arti, this thing, that is, so many things they do. But with an impersonalistic understanding. And because of that devotion, they might get self-realized. But otherwise, one cannot disassociate himself from matter, because matter is the energy of the Lord. So they are already merged in the energy of the Lord. Okay. And they want to merge into the Brahmajyoti. But they can do that only by the mercy of the Lord. Even to go to Brahmajyoti, they need the Lord's mercy. Bhakti or devotional service to the Lord means to become free from material entanglement and then to enter into the kingdom of God, becoming one like him. Not one with him, but one like him. Okay. One can become one like him, but not one with him. Then he speaks about Sayujya Mukti, or being merged into the existence or body of the Lord. That's called Sayujya Mukti. And even in Sayujya Mukti, the living entity is always individual. It's not that he loses his individuality. He might be unconscious, or he might be like he's in a coma stage, okay, where he's not aware of his individuality, but he remains as an individual. So this is what I think for those who want to merge, or those yogis who have this impersonalistic attitude, they merge into Garbhodakshaya Vishnu or Mahavishnu. So before creation, then they are merged in the body of the Lord. They are sitting on the body of the Lord in an unconscious state. Okay, so when these living entities, those living entities who have material desires, okay, who have to be subsequently created, and Mahavishnu breathes, And then Garbhodaksha Vishnu takes one portion or one set of living entities into his own universe. And then the living entities are again sitting on the body of the Garbhodaksha Vishnu. The living entities are not conscious at that time. Okay, they are all unconscious. Their consciousness is not manifested because they do not have devotional inclination for the Lord. So they are not consciously manifesting their any inclination. The material nature is not there. Okay, they are merged in the body of the Lord. So they cannot enact their material pastimes, so-called pastimes, or enact or fulfill their material desires. So they cannot go there because it's not yet created. And they do not have devotional inclination also. So they cannot be devotees of Mahavishnu also. So they are in an unconscious state, in a limbo state. Okay, so those yogis who want to have this impersonalistic tendency, or they want to merge into the existence of the Lord, they sometimes go to, during the end of the creation, they sit in Mahavishnu and they remain unconscious. And then when the next subsequent creation happens, they again come back. Okay, because their material desires are not yet fulfilled. So even though those yogis who have not perfected their yoga process, then they go there and then they again come back. Only Bhakti Vedanta can understand the Lord to some extent. So Bhakti should be there and Vedanta should be there. Vedanta plus Bhakti. Vedanta means self-realization. Bhakti means realization of the personality of Godhead to some extent. So this is Bhakti Vedanta. So one can know the Lord to a certain extent by self-surrender and a devotional attitude. Srila Vyasadeva therefore was not satisfied simply with compiling the Vedanta Sutra, because that's Vedanta that lead to self-realization. But Srimad Bhagavatam is the absolute medium by which to understand the absolute truth. You know, this is the relationship between Vedanta Sutra and Srimad Bhagavatam. Vedanta Sutra can lead one to self-realization, but Srimad Bhagavatam can lead one to pure devotional service, where one can know to some extent about the absolute truth. So that is why Srila Vyasadeva was not satisfied, because Vedanta will lead one only to self-realization, to understand that one is Brahman, one is spirit. To know the Lord, one must go beyond. Therefore, Srimad Bhagavatam is a natural commentary on Vedanta Sutra, explains the absolute truth. Whereas Vedanta Sutra does not explain the absolute truth directly. Srimad Bhagavatam achieves that. Therefore, it is best for me to surrender unto his feet, which alone can deliver one from the miseries of repeated birth and death. Such surrender is all auspicious and allows one to perceive all happiness. Even the sky cannot estimate the limits of its own expansion. So what can others do when the Lord himself is unable to estimate his own limits? Okay, so this is what we discussed last class. The Lord himself is unable to estimate his own limits. So Lord Brahma's advice is surrender. Simply surrender onto the lotus feet of the Lord. And men of this insignificant planet should kindly accept. He's begging basically. Please accept the instruction of Brahmaji and would do well to surrender onto the lotus feet of the Lord rather than try to estimate the length and breadth of the Lord's potencies. Just like the Lord is unlimited, his potencies are also unlimited. So the living entity cannot understand even the material cosmos completely. Okay. So when Lord Brahma says that to understand the Lord, we can understand the Lord only to some extent, it includes his energies also. The spiritual realm also cannot be completely understood by the living entity, even if it takes shelter of the internal potency of the Lord. Similarly, the living entities, even up to the level of Lord Brahma, even they cannot understand the complete cosmic manifestation. Although Lord Brahma might be creating, based on the framework which Garbhodaksha Vishnu provides, still he cannot completely understand the material manifestation of the Lord, because the energy of the Lord is unlimited as the Lord is. As Krishna is unlimited, his energies are also unlimited. So the infinitesimal living entity or the finite living entity cannot understand even the potencies of the Lord. So that's why Parikshit Maharaj, I think it was Parikshit Maharaj or who it was, in the 4th chapter, he said it's not possible even for the great demigods to understand the cosmic manifestation, but still you explain it to me. I think it was a verse like that. I don't know, Parikshit Maharaj was Narada, I don't remember. Anyways, the point is that even great demigods cannot understand. So even to understand Yeah, it's there in the 5th canto, right? Shukdev Goswami speaks, when he's going to speak about the planetary systems in the 5th canto, he says that it's not possible to explain everything or to understand everything, but how much ever I can understand or I can explain, I'll explain. Then he explains the whole planetary systems in the 5th canto. So it's not possible. If it's not possible for a great person like Shukdev Goswami, you can understand it's not possible for other living entities also. So, to understand the length and breadth of Lord's potencies, Parshit Maharaj asks, okay, 4th chapter. Okay. So, it's not possible for the living entities to even estimate the length and breadth of the Lord's potencies. So those who consider that they are Lord of all the survey, they just die again and again. Anyone denying this surrendering process, as recommended both in the Bhagavad Gita and the Srimad Bhagavatam, or for that matter in all revealed scriptures, all authorized scriptures, will be forced to surrender onto the laws of material nature. So one must surrender onto the Lord, either through his external energy or through his internal energy. By surrendering onto the Lord, one is happy and liberated, but by surrendering onto material nature, the living entity suffers. So the end of all suffering means surrendering onto the Lord, because the surrendering process itself is Bhavachiddam, liberation from all material miseries, just by surrendering onto the Lord. Swastyayanam, perception of all happiness. And Sumangalam, the source of everything auspicious. So this is continuing how the happiness, the liberty and auspiciousness is limited in the material realm. But in the association with the Lord, it is unlimited. That's the nature of spiritual happiness. It's Brahma Saukyam Tvanantam. Spiritual happiness is unlimited. So this also we discussed in last class, that spiritual happiness increases. There is no limitation to it. There is no limitation to Sat feature. There is no limitation to Chit, and no limitation to Ananda. So spiritual happiness keeps increasing, both for Krishna as well as for the living entities. So the happiness derived from the Lord may be measured by the Lord, but the happiness increases again, and the Lord measures it again, and then again the happiness increases more and more, and the Lord measures it more and more. And as such, there is eternally a competition between increment and measurement. So much so that the competition is never stopped, but goes on unlimitedly ad infinitum. Okay. So it goes on unlimitedly in spiritual realm. It's amazing. Anandam Buddhivardhanam. Since neither Lord Shiva nor you nor I could ascertain the limits of spiritual happiness, how can other demigods know it? And because all of us are bewildered by the illusory external energy of the Supreme Lord, we can see this manifested cosmos according to our individual ability. So we can perceive, we can understand this cosmic manifestation only up to our individual abilities. Okay, so even though the things that we are discussing now, whatever we have understood according to our limited ability. But then, if devotees advance themselves more and more, then more and more understanding comes just by reading the same section. That's why Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said that Srimad Bhagavatam is unlimited, and Prati Akshare Nana Arthakoy. There are so many meanings in each and every syllable of Bhagavatam, and even between the spaces of the syllable. Guru Maharaj says, so much understanding is there, and that understanding can be developed as we surrender more and more to Krishna. As surrendering increases, as devotional service increases, then understanding also increases. Okay. So whatever we have discussed now, it's only a very infinitesimal portion. What we have understood is a little bit whatever we can understand. But the understanding is just like an ocean, and we have just touched a drop. So mohitam nabhijanati mamebhyah paramabhyayam. So those who are bewildered by material nature, they cannot understand the Lord's supreme position. Brahma, Narada and Lord Shiva know about the Lord to a considerable extent, and therefore one should follow the instructions of these great personalities instead of being satisfied with a tiny brain and its playful discoveries such as spacecraft and similar products of science. So this is a conclusion. Ashok Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, with confused intelligence, we speak of the 1/4 portion made by Maya, but only according to our own knowledge, Atma Samam. We do not know everything. So even the great devotees, acharyas. Some extent we can understand. So what can be done? Let us offer our respectful obeisances onto that Supreme Personality of Godhead. That's all. Whose incarnations and activities are chanted by us for glorification, though he can hardly be fully known as he is. Now, after explaining all these things, then it's kind of, not so depressing, but it's kind of a bit difficult that, he's inconceivable, we cannot understand him at all, even after so many technical details have been explained about him. So, what else can be done? Surrender onto the Lord, offer respectful obeisances onto the Lord, and hear the glories of the Lord. And that way, you can understand something about him. It just shows how insignificant we all are. Such an insignificant. People think, or rather we ourselves think, that we are accomplishing so many things, we can do so many things, we know so many things. But actually we don't know anything. Even when Lord Brahma is saying that he cannot know much of the Lord, the creator of all of our intelligence, then what can we understand? Just surrender, that's all. Just chant and be happy. When the senses are purified by the process of hearing, chanting, remembering and worshipping the lotus feet of the holy deity, etc., the Lord reveals himself proportionately to the advancement of the quality of devotional service. Ye yatha mam prapadyante tam sataiva bhajamyaham. So several of these verses from Bhagavad Gita are related to what we are discussing here. That's why Bhagavad Gita is the preliminary, and then Bhagavatam expands on that knowledge in quite some detail. So what we should do is, we must be ready to undergo the prescribed devotional duties, following the path shown by the predecessors in the disciplic succession from Brahma, Narada and similar authorities. And then, if that happens, then the Lord is pleased with us, and then he reveals himself. A hard worker can present a juggler of words before an audience, but can never know the Supreme Personality of God in his personal feature, right? Humble devotees can please the Lord by his earnest devotional activities. Simply by hearing and chanting the glories of the activities of the Lord's incarnation, one can certainly see within himself the identity of the Lord. So this is the process. Hearing and chanting the glories of the Lord, one can certainly see himself, within himself, the identity of the Lord. So one can see Krishna just by hearing and chanting and remembering. 3 processes. That's it. Tach saddhana muneyo jnana vairagya yuktaya pashyantyatmani chatmanam bhaktya shruta grihitaya. The conclusion is that one cannot know the Supreme Personality of Godhead fully by any method. Okay, so that's the conclusion. So why should we do this? But he can be seen and felt partially by the devotional process of hearing, chanting, etc. So the living entity is never equal to the Lord. The living entity is always lower than the Lord. So from 39 to 45, Lord Brahma speaks about the glories of Mahavishnu. And you can also take it as the summary again of the creation process. And Srila Prabhupada gives some unique understandings here. We will discuss that. That Supreme Original Personality of Godhead, Lord Shri Krishna, expanding his plenary portion as Mahavishnu, the first incarnation, creates this manifested cosmos, but he is unborn. His plenary portion, so it's an expansion, but he is unborn. So we cannot say Mahavishnu is born from Krishna. It's not that. Mahavishnu is an expansion of Krishna, and both are eternal. Okay, just like the living entities are eternal, even though they are the part and parcels of Krishna. Similarly, the expansions of Krishna are also eternal. They are not born. Okay, so this is proper way of understanding. This might seem very trivial at this point, but when you read if you go into more details of the Acharya's work, like Sandarbhas or some commentary of Baldevidya commentary of Vedanta Sutra, these things would make sense. Okay, these things we should be very clear of. That Lord Mahavishnu is not born from the Shankarshan expansion. Okay, not that he's not born, he's eternal. So we have to understand this minor technical detail, that it's an expansion of the Lord, but then he's not born from the Lord. We do not say that he's born from the Lord. It's an expansion of the Lord. So that way both are eternal. Okay, birth gives an idea that the Lord was not manifest before a certain point of time, and then he became manifest like this. But Lord Mahavishnu is an eternal form of the Lord. So he is not manifest. For the purpose of this material creation, we say, that this form of the Lord expanded from this, and initially there was no kind of creation. Then Mahavishnu, he breathed, and then he started creation like this. But it is not something which is bound by time, because we are bound by time. We like to think like this. We'd like to understand the creation process like this. But the whole creation process itself is inconceivable. It's not bound by time, because we are bound by time. We say we have a sequence of what happened. The expansions happened like this. No, we have a sequence. Originally, the Swayamrupa Krishna, then Balaram expanded from him. But can we say that one point of time Balaram was not there, and then after that particular moment, then Balaram, he came up? No, it's not like that. They're eternal. But we have this, we want to understand everything chronologically. That way it makes some sense of who the Swayamrupa, the form of the Lord is. What's the expansion of the Lord? Who is higher? Who is lower? It gives an idea, it gives a sense. So that way the chronology is mentioned. Okay, in the Shastra itself, that way the chronology is mentioned. That's why here it said, the Supreme Original Personality of Lord Shri Krishna expanding his plenary portion as Mahavishnu. So this did not happen at one particular point of time. The form of Mahavishnu is always existing. Okay, and for the purpose of this material creation. So that way the material creation is also always, it's permanent, it's always going on. It's manifested at one point, unmanifested at one point, but that does not mean that the pradhana or the material cloud was created at one particular moment of time. The cloud is already there. It's an energy of the Lord. Just like the Lord is unborn, his energy is also unborn. You cannot think of the sun's heat and light without the sun, right? When the sun is there, the heat and light is automatically there. There is no meaning to sun without the heat and light, right? But although heat and light is different from the sun, but then heat and light is also part of the sun. They both are eternal. In that sense, the heat and light and sun, they are existing simultaneously, even though the light and heat is expanded from the sun. Right? Are you able to understand? So that way, there is no point of time when the expansion comes up. They are eternal. Okay, so they are not born. So therefore, he is unborn. Lord Mahavishnu is not born. The creation, however, takes place in him, and the material substance and manifestations are all himself, because everything comes from him. Even the material ingredients come from Mahavishnu. This is actually explained in Chaitanya Charitamrita. When we speak about Advaita Acharya, the glories of Advaita Acharya, I think it's 5th chapter in Adi Leela. 5th chapter or 4th chapter? Okay, I don't remember. Anyways, when the glories of Advaita Acharya is explained by Krishnas Kaviraj Goswami, at that point, Advaita Acharya is considered the expansion of Mahavishnu as an ingredient cause. It's an expansion of the ingredient cause form of the Lord, it is said. So even the material ingredients that come from the Lord, he is an expansion, or he is that. Advaita Acharya is that. Anyway, we will not get into those details. Just understand that the material substance and manifestations are all himself. They also come from the Lord. He is the ingredient cause also. He maintains them for some time and absorbs them into himself again. Now, in the purport, Srila Prabhupada makes a point about the impersonal form of the Lord. Okay. So normally when we speak of impersonal, we think that he does not have any form. Correct? It's Brahma Jyoti, an expanse. It does not have any form. But Srila Prabhupada gives a very amazing understanding here. He says, the impersonal conception of the absolute truth is also a form of the Lord called Avyakta Murti. It says, no? Jagat Avyakta Murtina. So it's also a form of the Lord. Murti means form. But because his impersonal feature is inexplicable to our limited senses, he is the Avyakta Murti form, and in that inexplicable form of the Lord, the whole creation is resting. Or in other words, the whole creation is the Lord himself, and the creation is also non-different from him. But simultaneously, he, as the original personality of Godhead Shri Krishna, is aloof from the created manifestation. So this is an explanation of Achinta Bheda Bheda with respect to this material realm. Okay. So Murti, Avyakta Murti means the impersonal feature is inexplicable to our limited senses. We cannot understand what kind of form this impersonal form, this Avyakta, impersonal conception, what kind of form it is, because it is beyond our understanding. It's beyond our senses. We cannot understand it. It's inexplicable. Okay. But it suffices to understand that in this explicable means that which cannot be explained. In this unexplainable form of the Lord, the whole creation is resting. That is why the impersonal conception, impersonal form of the Lord is said to be potent. Okay. So we can understand that potency, if so much potency is there, then the potent, the root or the cause of that should be a potent. And when we think of someone who's energetic or potent, we try to conceive of him as a form, right? But the impersonal conception, we cannot explain that form. It's not conceivable to our senses, but it has potency. And in that potency, the whole material cosmos is being created and maintained. Okay, so when we speak about potency, again to summarize, potency means there should be a potent, and when we think of a potent, there must be a form to him. We attribute a form to that because of our limited senses. But that form is inexplicable in terms of or in connection to the impersonal conception. But this impersonal conception is what is maintaining, is the cause of creation and maintenance of this whole material manifestation. Okay, because it's all, the whole creation is resting in that inexplicable form of the Lord. So, okay, an easier way to understand it is, in other words, the whole creation is the Lord Himself. Oh, yeah. Simple. And the creation is also non-different from Him, but simultaneously He is aloof from the created manifestation. Okay, so He is the creation itself, but is aloof from the creation. And the whole creation is the Lord Himself, and the creation is also non-different from Him. So it is like this, when I think in the 11th canto, is it, or Markandeya Rishi enters into the mouth of Krishna during the final universal devastation. During a kalpa, when Lord's one day of Brahma is end, then this devastation where all the 14 planetary systems are destroyed. Okay, but Markandeya Rishi had the benediction that he can live through several kalpas. Okay, so he sees the devastation again and again. And actually, in Mahabharata it comes in Vanaparva, where Yudhishthira Maharaj, when Markandeya Rishi gives lots of instructions or tells lots of stories to the Pandavas when they are in the forest in Vanaparva, then a question is asked to Markandeya Rishi that you have seen different kalpas. So can you please tell what happens when one day of Brahma is destroyed? Because even Brahma is not there, but Markandeya Rishi has seen it. Okay, he is the only living entity who is alive at that point. So can you tell us what actually happens? So Markandeya Rishi at that time glorifies the Lord. And he says that I saw only universal devastation all around me. I was floating in the universal waters of universal devastation. At that time, I saw one baby, Krishna, Supreme Lord, who was floating in this leaf of a banyan tree. And actually there was a tree also there. So the Lord asked me to take shelter of that tree for some time. And then I went there and took shelter. And then suddenly, after some time, when I was looking outside, then I was withdrawn into the mouth of the Lord. And once he entered into the mouth of the Lord, what did he see? The whole material manifestation is right there in front of him. Okay, so he is part of that complete universe. The whole universe is manifest. Not only a small part of it as we see it, but all the 14 planetary systems. Everything is there within his mouth. This is also what Mother Yashoda saw within Krishna when she asked him to open his mouth to see the dirt. So the whole 14 planetary system is within the Lord. But then he is also within the creation when he is performing his pastimes. So Markandeya Rishi saw the whole 14 planetary systems within the Lord. He lived there for some time. And then finally, again, he came out of Krishna's mouth when the creation, the next kalpa was about to be started, or Lord Brahma was about to create. So the creation is there within the Lord, and the Lord is within the creation also, but then He's aloof from it also. So these things are inconceivable for us to understand from our practical experience point of view. Okay. So the impersonal form is merely one of His features. Fine. The Lord speaks, or Prabhupada speaks about, he gives a summary of creation of Mahatattva from the causal ocean, then the spiritual sky, expansion of his rays, Mahatattva cloud, Garbhodakshaya Vishnu, then Prakriti is created, and the conclusion is that these are all but displays of the Lord's inconceivable personal energies, of which no one can have any full information. Okay. The personality of Godhead is pure, being free from all contaminations of material tinges. Now we are speaking about Lord Mahavishnu, Karanodakshaya Vishnu. He is the absolute truth and the embodiment of full and perfect knowledge. He is all pervading, without beginning or end, and without rival. O Narada, O great sage, the great thinkers can know him when completely freed from all material hankerings and when sheltered under undisturbed conditions of the senses. Now in this one, so many points are there. Okay. So the great thinkers can know him when they are completely freed from all material hankerings and when sheltered under undisturbed conditions of the senses. So they take shelter of their own sense when it is undisturbed. So which basically means the senses can remain undisturbed only when they are beyond the modes. Okay, at that time one can take shelter of the senses, and when they are freed from all material hankerings, then they can know the Lord to some extent. Otherwise, by untenable arguments, all is distorted and the Lord disappears from our sight. Just by argumentation, one cannot know the Lord because it is in the purview of our mind. Lord is forever free from material contamination, unlike what Mayavadis think. Mayavad philosophy tries to designate the Lord as contaminated by a material body. That is why they are called as Mayavadis. Correct? They think the deity form of the Lord is Maya. And when the Lord comes in his incarnations, then he is the embodiment of the topmost Sattva-guna. He is not, because Sattva-guna also is materially contaminated in this material world. Sattva-guna is also contaminated by Rajoguna and Tamoguna. You cannot see the pure form of Sattva-guna, but the Lord when he comes is the pure form of Sattva-guna. They say, okay, we'll give you that. He is the pure form of Sattva-guna, but still material form. And because he is pure form of Sattva-guna, uncontaminated by Rajoguna and Tamoguna, therefore he can perform his glorious activities. That is how the Mayavadis speak. And because we do not have the experience of a pure Sattva-guna, therefore we think the Lord is so great. And it's inexplicable to us in that sense. So Sattva-guna is a form of Sattva-guna, and that is his incarnation. But then it's bogus, because the Lord is never contaminated by a material body, even the body made of so-called pure Sattva-guna. This is his speciality, perpetual freedom from all material contamination. This distinguishes the Lord from the individual common living entities who have the aptitude for being subordinated by nescience and thus become materially designated. But the Lord is perpetually free from all material contamination. The same point that we have discussed. And Srila Prabhupada explains again this whole thing in the purport. Although after liberation, the living entity can become one with the same quality of existence of the Lord, his very tendency to become contaminated, which the Lord never has, makes the individual living entity different from the Lord. Okay. And his Shuddham Apapa Viddham. Okay. Apapa Viddham is a very important quality of the Lord, that he is never polluted by any sinful activity. He does not undergo any sinful reactions, as the so-called Mayavadis think. In contemporary, Ishopanishad, it's there. Actually, Prabhupada speaks about Apapa Viddham even in the small books. Recently, this Perfect Question, Perfect Answer also he speaks about this Apapa Viddham, that the Lord is never impacted by sinful reactions. But those nowadays, those who call themselves so-called Hindus, then they say that because the Lord killed Vali in a hideous manner, therefore the hunter, Vali became the hunter, and then he shot the arrow at Krishna in his ankles, and Krishna had to undergo the reaction for his previous Janma, Rama Janma's activity. It's bogus. Okay, this is not the reason. we try, these pious Hindus, they try to explain all these things based upon their own perception of karma, vikarma, akarma, on their activities and reactions like this. But the Lord is beyond that. The Lord is never influenced by his activities. So even Lord Ramchandra shot arrow at Vali, it is a transcendental pastime. He does not have to suffer for that. Okay, so that's not the proper way of explanation. That's not the proper way of understanding Lord's pastime. So we should be careful that we not get into that. We should always understand that the Lord's position is transcendental to the material modes. Okay, people might give so many reasons as if the Lord is contaminated by some sinful activity. He performed this, because he should have killed Vali right in fright. This is one of the examples I'm just giving, which came to my mind. But the Lord is transcendental. Lord Ramchandra is not engaged in all this material. He's not bound by the material dharma, adharma and other things. He's transcendental to all these points, all these aspects of material dharma and adharma. But foolish people don't understand that. The Lord is within everything and He is all covering also without being distributed, without disturbed by the activities of the individual souls. Okay, so this is again, and gives example of sun. The sun is never contaminated by anything infectious. So even the sun, which is one of the material objects, is so powerful, then what to speak of the Lord? Personally, He has nothing to do, for everything is being carried out by His omnipotent energies. Parasya Shakti Vividhaiva Shruyate Swabhaviki Jnana Bala Kriyacha. So this, again, this reference is given at multiple places in this chapter, in the purport. We did not see that, but this proves the point. As such, there are basic differences between the Lord and the living entities in so many respects. The Lord has no competitor and He has nothing to fear from any other living being, nor can anyone be equal to Him. So this purport is basically distinguishing the Lord from the living entities. So it's a comparison of so many aspects of the Lord's qualities and the corresponding lack of those qualities in the living entities. So that way the Lord and the living entities completely distinguished from one another. And this established the Siddhanta of who is a living entity and who is Ishvara. So Jnanis, Karmis and Yogis have demands. So the Lord moves further away. Okay. So He does not like to be with them. So therefore they cannot be pacified, he says. Karnarnavashai Vishnu is the first incarnation of the Supreme Lord. And He is the master of eternal time, space, cause and effects, mind, the elements, the material ego, the modes of nature, the senses, the universal form of the Lord, Garbhodakshai Vishnu, and the sum total of all living beings, both moving and non-moving. So He is the Lord, because from Him everything comes. All of them, all of these things come only from Him as cause and effect. So He might be direct causes in some things and He might be an indirect cause, but ultimately it comes from Him. So therefore Karnodakshaya Vishnu is glorified here. And material world is a chance for conditioned living entities. We have already discussed this. So we will just skip 43 to 45. Okay, continuing from the previous verse, Lord Brahma gives a big list. Just should read this. I, myself, Brahma, Lord Shiva, Lord Vishnu, great progenitors like Daksha and Swayambhuva Manu, yourselves, Narada and the Kumaras, heavenly demigods like Indra and Chandra, the leaders of the Bhurloka planets, the leaders of the earthly planets, the leaders of the lower planets, the leaders of the Gandharva planets, the leaders of the Vidyadhara planets, the leaders of the Charana Loka planets, the leaders of the Yakshas, Rakshas and Urugas, the great sages, the great demons, the great atheists and the great spacemen, as well as the dead bodies, evil spirits, Saturns, Jinn, Kushmandas, great aquatics, great beasts and great birds, etc. In other words, anyone and everyone exceptionally possessed of power, mental and perceptual dexterity, strength, forgiveness, beauty, modesty, opulence and breeding, whether with form or formless, may appear to be specific truth. Okay, so all of these might appear to be the specific truth and the form of the Lord. Okay, people, I think this is what it will come here. Yeah, okay. They might consider that all this These great personalities are actually the form of the Lord. But actually, they are not so. They are only fragments of the transcendental potency of the Lord. This is a conclusive understanding. Okay. So, all this, none of them is the Supreme Lord. Every one of them possesses only a fragment of the great potencies of the Supreme Lord. And the less intelligent man is surprised to see wonderful actions of material phenomena, as aborigines are fearful of a great thunderbolt, gigantic banyan tree, great lofty mountains, like this. We discussed this before, somewhere. Yeah. No, I remember speaking about this, that foolish people, when they see the manifestations of material nature, they consider that as the supreme. I think very Virat Rupa discussion. Yeah. For such undeveloped human beings, merely the slight display of the Lord's potency is captivating, and they think that this is the form of the Lord, without any factual information of the Lord himself. So, see, this is the definition of Shaktas given here. Those who are simply astonished by the powers of anything in the creation of the Lord, without any factual information of the Lord himself, are known as Shaktas, worshippers of great powers. So, those who worship the Shakti of the Lord are called as Shaktas, in a broad category, not only those who are worshipping Durga or Kali. She is the energy of material energy of the Lord, and everything is manifested from her. So, Shaktas, what they think is, because everything is material energy, everything is matter around them, and the ruler of the matter or the controller of all that is Kali. So, therefore, if she is worshipped, you will get nice material facilities. These less intelligent people, have no information about the transcendental potency of the Lord. They do not understand that even Durga is manifesting only a potency, a fragmental potency of the Lord. With that themselves itself they are captivated. So therefore they are mentioned here as less intelligent. The modern scientist is also a Shakta, okay, because he is also engaged only in working with material elements, and he thinks by material power he will achieve everything, even immortality. A material scientist, he thinks like that. With advancement of biological, maybe technological and biological advancement, they will have men live for thousands and thousands of years without or stopping the process of death, and medical advancement will increase such that those people who have died, they will be preserved in a refrigerator, and after 200 years when the advancement has improved, then they will bring them back to life. It's called as cryogenics. Cryogenics is a system where people think that now the scientific advancement is not so good, so therefore whoever dies, he'll have to pay that much amount of money and his body will be preserved for another 200 years. And then it's assumed that in another next 200 years, the scientific technology will increase such that they can inject one chemical and bring him back to life. And they think the same person will come back to life, even though he's dead. Foolishness. Then these low-grade persons gradually rise to become Shauryas, worshipper of sun god, or Ganapatyas, like Janata Janardhan or Daridra Narayan in the form of Ganapati. Then Lord Shiva in search of the ever-existing soul, and then to the stage of Lord Vishnu, the super soul. So this is your Panchopasana. The general worship of Shanidev, the Lord of distressful conditions, and Shitala Devi, the goddess of smallpox, is also common among the mass of people. And there are many foolish men who worship the mass of people or poor class of people. The Shitala Devi, the Shitala Devi was very prominent worship in Bengal during Siddhanta Saraswati's time. Smallpox was very, it's severe than chickenpox. Now they say it's eradicated, but during that time, 1910s, 1920, like this, when Siddhanta Saraswati was there, smallpox was a ravaging epidemic. Okay, I can say like COVID. It was epidemic and people were dying because of that. So people at that time used to worship Shitala Devi. Actually, in Siddhanta Saraswati's writing, he refers so much to Shitala Devi, that blaspheming them, obviously, that they do not have no proper knowledge. They are worshipping Shitala Devi to overcome some temporary bodily miseries, but they do not surrender unto the Lord. Formless means different exhibitions of the Lord's transcendental potencies. O Narada, now I shall state one after another the transcendental incarnation of the Lord, known as Leela Avtaras. Hearing of their activities, counteracts all foul matter accumulated in the ear. Okay, foul matter accumulated in the ear, because the tendency to hear is so prominent that, if you remember, the first is sound is created, and from that sound, all material sound, then everything that we know about a lot. Sound is you remember that, right? Sound is what is a representation of the material object, just like the seer and the seen. You remember, we discussed that in the 5th chapter. So sound explains everything that is material, because by hearing that, we understand the qualities of that sound. So when one is born in this material realm, he hears so many sounds about different material activities. So those are all foul matter which is accumulated in the ear. He says, these pastimes are pleasing to hear and are to be relished, and therefore they are in my heart. So one should counteract this foul matter which is accumulated in the ear, because by hearing of these activities, now they are pleasing to hear, they are to be relished, and therefore they are there in the heart of Lord Brahma. Okay, so Srila Prabhupada is a straightforward purport. We have seen this before. So one thing is, such activities of the Lord are principally of two varieties. One concerns the mundane manifestation of the material creative force, and the other deals with his pastimes in the form of different incarnations in terms of time and place. So both are important. The material pastimes of the Lord, which we have discussed, also his transcendental Leela Avataras. So till this point, in these 2 chapters, Lord Brahma spoke about the material creation, the material pastime of the Lord. Okay. The material creative force, manifestation of the material creative force. Now he is going to speak the different incarnations of the Lord. Okay, so these 2 are the principal activities of the Lord. Okay, so thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purports of the 2nd canto, 6th chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Purusha Sukta confirmed. Okay, so any questions? Do you have any questions? Any doubts? Okay, yeah. Srila Prabhupada ki, Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Gaur Prema.